Next on our presentation list, we have Dr. Maybach, who will introduce our outstanding PhD alumni.
Which is incredible pleasure for me to do so. Let's see, am I on the screen? Yes, I am. So you all know him as JT, but JT actually has a full name, and it's Jagadish Thaker. Jagadish was, JT helps me reflect on the sort of the 7 generations approach to being a good steward of the earth and of humanity. He came to be a student of mine, but in fact, I feel like I am now the student of his, even though he long since left us. He lives halfway around the world in New Zealand. But because Jagadish came to study at Mason to get his doctoral degree, because he had a deep belief, an abiding belief in the power of research to serve humanity. And that's why he wanted to come to us. That's how he spent his time with us. And that is what he has done ever since he has left us. Use the communication science tools we helped him develop to create the conditions for the betterment of people in countries around the world. In New Zealand, where he lives, in the US, where he did live, in India, where he was raised. He's really been an absolute model of this incredible tradition of scholarship for a purpose, scholarship to advance humanity. As many of you know, I like to say that the only thing that I've learned in 40 years in my career that I really believe is true, absolutely, and I'm willing to defend, I'm willing to fight on that hill to defend it. I believe that every public communication campaign in history that has worked has featured simple, clear messages repeated often by a variety of trusted voices. Last summer, as the pandemic was raging in New Zealand and around the world, JT was on a New Zealand news interview, and he said, essentially, he was explaining why New Zealand was doing so well when the US and so many other countries were doing so badly in responding to the COVID pandemic. And he said it had a lot to do with simple, clear messages repeated often with compassion and kindness by a variety of trusted voices. He added a really important missing idea to the mantra that I had done my best to teach him. And in doing so, he revealed to me that my own mantra, that thing that I had learned over 40 years, was incomplete, but he completed it. And he did it on live TV, and he did it with compassion and kindness, which is absolutely what JT is all about, compassion and kindness. So I cannot think of a person I am more proud of. He was my first doctoral student at Mason. He has become a member of my family, both academically and personally. And so it is with great pleasure that I introduce you all to JT, Jagadish Thaker.
Thank you so much, Ed. Every time Ed speaks, I feel like he's talking about somebody else, some higher dimension of me. I've got a short note to share. So the first flight that I ever took on borrowed money and with $200 in my pocket was to the United States. That's the first time I ever got on a flight. It was a terrifying experience. And when I landed in Dallas, the Indian Student Association were supposed to pick me up, but nobody did. I waited in the airport overnight for 12 hours, only to realize that the Indian Association would come and do a pickup only for girls. So I felt maybe if I can just go back and sit in the plane, they will, drop me back home. 2 Bangladeshi students who were studying at George Mason took me to their hostel, and then I found my way through. But all that alienation, culture shock wore off the first time I met Don Boileau for a week-long teaching workshop. And some of the teaching strategies that I learned then have been useful for me even today. Ed interviewed me for a research assistant position. He asked me how many gallons of paint is used in India annually. I asked him, what's a gallon, start with? And then I asked him if I can just Google the answer. And he smiled and said no. Sharon Zhao was sitting right behind me. And as you see in Hollywood movies, I thought if I give him the wrong answer, my neck will get dislocated. Using broad parameters of number of houses, walls, and frequency of paint every year, I came up with an estimate. I knew it was wrong, but Ed smiled and said that was the right answer. He wasn't testing me if I got the figure right, but my strategy about finding such information. What I recommend about George Mason is what I miss the most. It's creating faculty which will not only take the horse to water, but following Bandura's social learning theory will role model the behaviors for you to increase your efficacy and help you succeed. Even after you leave, the connections that help you make the recommendations they write will ensure your career success. Like Ed's recommendations, like just you heard his speech, you want him to be your lawyer giving closing arguments in a jury. He will be your court poet, ensuring everyone knows what a valuable person you are for a job. From Gary, I learned the science of health communication, but also how to be a champion of diversity and inclusion, to set up a large tent for ideas to share and prosper. From Anne, I learned that simple conversations are complex endeavors of organizing. Her support and help, I'll still cherish every time I meet her during the ICA conferences. From Carl, I learned openness, to be thorough in ideas, words, and citation styles. I remember his feedback, always scribbled with red ink, even to the last citation. And I'm sure he still does that. From Kathy, I learned that the smartest scholar in the room can also have the sweetest voice, and her dedication to helping others learn is just unparalleled. Each member of the GMU faculty, even though I never did a class with or shared any research interests, were kind, welcoming, and made me feel this place belongs to me. I can succeed here. From Tim Gibson, I learned the joy of social change advocacy. He brings a depth of understanding to social issues with warmth and humor. From Shautron Zhao, I learned a lot of things, most importantly, being patient and helping slow learners like me. I even participated in Shautron Zhao's anti-smoking study, which I quickly dropped out to be a missing value and reduce the power of the study. But I hear that Xiaomei and Shautron have started a new anti-vaping study, so I can fulfill the promise of being a good participant there. I know #1 climate scientist in the public university and #2 climate scientist in the world. How cool is that? That's like knowing Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert in the comedy world. And fortunately, they both make me feel that I still work at the Daily Show, even though I live so far away. My advice to current grad student is that there will be tough times when you do not match the expectations of your mentors, when you will feel this is just too much for me, I'm not that smart enough. To them, I say, persist, seek help, ask for advice, because at GMU, you're not just there for 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years, but as with Ed, Gary, Shautron, Anne, and others, they are you with for life. They will continue to hold your hand no matter what you end up doing. And what I learned, another important thing at George Mason is that while scholarly research is important and valuable, it is but an important first step. Bridging the world of ideas with the world of messy public discussions and policy change requires you to step out of academia, to be a public intellectual. And at George Mason, you got several role models. Even today, I shamelessly replicate the work of Ed and other people at 4C, and I've been impactful precisely because of that. In America, as much I cherish the tradition of top scientific work, I also cherish the tradition of activism. As Saul Alinsky said once, true revolutionaries do not flaunt their radicalism. They cut their hair, put on suits, and bring the change from within. In New Zealand, there's a proverb by Maori ancestors which says, "Nau te roro, naku te roro, kaora te manuhiri." With your food basket and my food basket, together we will feed our people. This is our contribution to the world. Thank you so much for this award. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, everyone.
Nicely said, JT.